nothing for sure is canon unless you see it in Creature Commandos forward for the DCU.
Okay.
Now, in Creature Commandos, you'll hear them talk about things that happened in Suicide Squad or Peacemaker. Well, then those things automatically become canon. The truth is, almost all of Peacemaker is canon, with the exception of Justice League.
You're late, you dickheads.
Which,
So Peacemaker Season 2 sometimes brings some doubts into what's typically considered canon and what's actually not from the DC Extended Universe. It's crazy that we actually even call it the DCEU, yet it had its name from a publication of a news article covering the 2014 DC Cinematic Endeavors. So this new season will feature the 11th Street Gang, becoming unnoticed heroes after saving the world last season. Of course, some questions remain. How will James Gunn actually tackle the Justice League appearances in the season 1 finale? How the Creature Commandos in this new season will tackle Rick Flag Sr.'s quest for vengeance, and of course his son's death at the hands of Chris Smith in the 2021 The Suicide Squad film, which was an indirect sequel to the 2016 one. So how can we piece all of this together? In a panel at San Diego Comic-Con this weekend, James Gunn provided some news about the time of this season, notably mentioning his one-time gap from the incidents occurring in Metropolis. This is, of course, the events of 2025 Superman saving the city from a black hole caused by Luthor's reckless vendetta against him, while the Justice League, Justice Gang, in this case, and its new member Metamorpho stopped the conflict in Yarhampur, defeating the Boravian troops. So, spoilers alert, spoiler alert, very, very late now. This was, of course, the third act of the movie, and I really thought that this was going to solve some of the problems in the DCU coming into the DCU, but I was wrong. So my initial theory was, of course, The Flash. The Flash film was supposed to reset all the needless timelines. I didn't think that, of course, it was going to actually transition to DCU because it was filmed before the change, before James Gunn was appointed as CEO of DC Studios. But in terms of entering the fold, James Gunn lauded the feature. He said that it was one of the best superhero films of all time. We saw how that went and how, of course, the audience and critics reacted to it. Well, afterwards, with the non-cancellation of Peacemaker, or even the absence of a potential shift into becoming an Elseworlds project, much like Matt Reeves' Batman crime saga, it really told me everything that I needed to know. So I waited until Superman, as Creature Commandos was really self-contained in its approach, of course showing our first look into the DCU animated trinity, and I actually thought that the pocket universe / quantum unfolding chamber concepts would actually play a part in this. Now we got a black hole, as I mentioned before, and that meant that Luthor had a more wacky, more energy-consuming device than the White Dragon, Peacemaker's father, to tear a hole in the dimension. Now, the fact that we have a black hole, and of course it's a device that is much more, energy-consuming, just like I mentioned, it really shows, of course, and it mirrors Luthor's rage, of acknowledging or even, trying to consider Superman as a human being or, a person that should not be punished for having these powers. So it really is an interesting analogy that we can make with, of course, how it can actually be destructive to a point to actually tear a hole and split Metropolis in half. Now we got that black hole. If this black hole had any relevance to the grand scheme of things, it's probably transporting Ultraman to Hatray, a cubicle-shaped version of planet Earth, where he might even become in a future film, Bizarro, or even comic accurate Ultraman with the U sign, with the U symbol from Earth 3, which is pretty much the leader of the evil Justice League counterpart, the Crime Syndicate. But back to the basics, this really doesn't determine the shift from the DCU to DCU. So what actually will? There's two choices. With how Gunn normally in interviews doesn't really like the discussions of what's canon or not, in order to not let hardcore fans confuse the general audience any further, he might just ignore and move on to whatever's going next with this multiverse storyline that was indicated in the trailers and of course in the interviews with the cast, which Gunn did say was going to indicate where the DCU was going. So Peacemaker Season 2 is integral into seeing how, everything will piece out to this potentially 10-year plan to wrap up this God and Monsters chapter. So the new dimension Peacemaker was actually expected by many fans to be in was, of course, in this new universe with Superman, Creature Commandos, and Blue Beetle, but it might just be a story just tied to Chris' intentions of not being a joke anymore, rather than actually having all these ramifications and correcting some past mistakes. And maybe these adventures in this quantum unfolding chambers happen after he gets beat up by Rick Flag Sr. He comes at a point of realization where, let me use the technology that I have available into bettering myself, or actually finding a better life for myself. And this is actually some of the quests that are indicated in the upcoming episodes. So that's why the other choice of immediately replacing an Earth for another might be redundant. Gunn already said as well in an interview that his multiverse concepts differ highly from the MCU. And it might also be drawing away from the main conflict that Peacemaker is having in the season. As opposed to, of course, the MCU, the multiverse plays a huge role, especially in these new big event movies in terms of Deadpool and Wolverine, in the way that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness also dealt with the multiverse, and of course Doomsday and Secret Wars. But if anything this season is working towards establishing is a new Justice League movie, or even an event. If related to the universe, it might just be a Crisis on Two Earths event. I don't think that they'll do Infinite Earths, because it already has been done in live action before, and also in the animated sphere. And that can work for a Chapter 2 finale. I'm not saying that it won't work now, but I just don't think that it can be always the last resort for a DC event film. So what's actually canon in this, and what we can actually consider with all these discussions and all these things, podcast clips and interviews analyzed, the Suicide Squad and even parts of the 2016 film are definitely half canon, in the sense that characters that are presented in a new DCU carry over their own individual arcs for the overarching story. For the cameos that Gunn teased for this season, we could be seeing characters like Bloodsport, since Idris Elba and John Cena recently starred in Heads of State, and why not reunite again? Amanda Waller, of course, Ratcatcher 2, Superman, even Mr. Terrific, given half of the Justice Gang, and Maxwell Lord will appear in episode 1 of the new season. The Flash and Aquaman, who have appeared in the season 1 finale, are therefore not canon, given that Momoa is appearing as Lobo, and Gunn himself has talked about the King of Atlantis not being as widely known like the season 1 gag used to affirm.
DC is, what is part of the DCU? This is the world that Superman lives in. This is the world that Creature Commandos lives in. Up until this point, those are the only two things that are fully 100% canon, and the same thing is going to be true about Peacemaker Season 2. It's fully 100% canon in the DCU, but we did have to go back and change a few things from Season 1 that don't quite match with that world, because we were writing for the DCEU, which was kind of messy at the time, and who knows what was happening. Is Aquaman canon? We don't know. No, but my guess, I don't think Aquaman's canon. So one of our biggest running jokes in Season 1 is...
But at this point, because what you're starting to create as a new universe, it could become canon, right? Or is this yes or no now?
You're saying that Aquaman does not exist in a previous form. There's a possibility that you could use the character in the future, but right now...
It's unlikely that Aquaman is a famous hero in the DCU as Superman in Peacemaker Season 2 is happening.
They might just put the Justice Gang or any other metahumans assembled by Lord to replace the ones who actually witnessed the heroics that Peacemaker does in the Season 1 finale, when they're all standing at that house in the middle of nowhere. So what did you guys think of this video? Let me know down in the comments. What are your theories? What is canon? What is not? What do you guys think will happen in Peacemaker Season 2? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.